Good morning, Claire. It's Peter Fay from the clerk's office. Good to see you in Brampton again. And we're just testing your audio, so we've unmuted your mic, and good morning. Good morning, Claire. Claire Tucker. We've unmuted your mic, Claire, but we're not hearing you at the moment. We did check in with Anand, and his mic and video were working fine. So Claire, we're going to put you back on mute, and there's a button at the bottom of your WebEx window, and there will be a little arrow next to that with your microphone button. You should be able to configure your audio settings through that button. If that doesn't work, there's a button to the right with 3 dots. You can click on that and configure your settings.
Good morning, Peter. It's Councillor Santos checking in.
Thank you, Councillor Santos. You're coming through loud and clear.
Hi, Peter. The first check-in was Anand Patel from Brampton. It wasn't Anand Desai from the consultants. So yes. I don't think he's checked it yet.
Yes, thanks, Anand. Yeah, he was in earlier, and we did check him and his video, and everything was working fine.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And good morning, Doran. It's Peter Fay from the City Clerk's office. We just unmuted your mic. We just want to confirm your audio is working. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great. Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. So
okay, awesome. Great, thank you.
Thank you. So you'll be in the attendee list, and when we get to the delegation, we'll bring you into the meeting as a panelist. Then when it's your turn to speak, you can unmute your mic and turn on your video if you so choose. And just a reminder to yourself and the other delegates is the delegation time limit is up to 5 minutes, so please try to respect that if possible. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Morning, Peter. Councillor Wellens signing on.
Thank you, Councillor Wellens. You're coming through loud and clear.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good morning, Peter. Just checking in. Councillor Fortini.
Thank you, Councillor Fortini. You're coming through loud and clear.
Good morning, Peter. Councillor Williams checking in.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. You're coming through loud and clear. Good morning, Claire Tucker. It's Peter Fay again. We're just going to unmute your mic and see if you've been able to resolve your audio issue. Good morning, Claire. We're still not hearing you. We're hoping that you hear us. But your microphone looks like it's activated. We have unmuted it, but we're not picking up anything from you. But just to confirm, Anand Desai, we have confirmed, and everything was working fine. So I see you've just left, and hopefully, Claire, you can rejoin again, and the connection will be good. Thank you. We'll check in a moment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Yes, it's Mayor Brown here. Just want to verify that my connection is okay.
Good morning, Mayor Brown. Yes, you're coming through loud and clear. Thank you. Good morning, Claire. It's Peter Fay from the clerk's office. We're just unmuting your mic and we'll just test your
Oh, I
audio.
can hear him through the phone. I can't hear him.
Hi, Claire. We can hear you now.
Can you hear me now, Peter?
Yes, we can, Claire. Good morning.
Okay, I can't hear you.
Okay. I'm going to suggest maybe one option is if we can't make that connection, if you want to call in, there's a telephone-only call-in number. You won't be able to see anything, and unfortunately, the live stream is about 30-second delayed. But you will be able to, I guess, you and Anand are presenting, so I don't know if Anand's taking the lead on the presentation, or was it yourself? And I realize she can't hear me.
Good morning and welcome to our virtual meeting of Brampton's Committee of Council. We will begin the meeting with the City Clerk calling the roll for attendance at today's meeting. Mr. Clerk.
Members of committee, I will call your name. Please indicate your presence. Councillor Santos.
Present.
Councillor Willens.
Present.
Councillor Paleshi.
Present, good morning.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman.
Present?
Councillor Medeiros. Councillor Medeiros. Councillor Medeiros, I'll come back to you. Councillor Williams.
I'm here. Good morning.
Councillor Fortini.
Good morning, I'm here.
Councillor Singh.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon. I do not see Councillor Dillon in the meeting at the moment. Come back to him. Councillor Medeiros.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Dillon. Don't see Councillor Dillon. He'll be marked as absent at the moment. Mayor Brown.
Here, present.
Thank you. And Chair Visante is present in person, so we have 10 members present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. Next, we have approval of the agenda. Does any member have an item to add? Councillor Willens.
Yes, I would like to add just a quick item under announcement, please. It's there now, 5.1, I believe.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And Mr. Clerk, do we have any other updates?
Mr. Chair, yes, a couple of updates. First, item 11.2.1 is an information report on the potential scope of an educational and employment master plan. Staff have requested that this item be withdrawn so that further consideration could be given to the report before providing a further fulsome report to committee. That's 11.2.1, request to withdraw that item. And we also have an added delegation request which came in this morning from Sylvia Roberts in regards to item 8.2.6, which is the staff report on the amendment to the request to begin procurement for the hiring of contractors for the construction of the new Victoria Park Arena and Sports Hall of Fame and addition and renovation to Chris Gibson Recreation Center.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. I have a motion moved by Councillor Willens to approve the agenda as amended, and instead of seeking
Sorry,
a recorded vote,
Mr. Chair, I couldn't get my name on there for.
Councillor Fortini.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just asking, I think the Brampton U, I don't see it on the agenda, that's one. And the second one, I think 7.4 in camera, I'd like to defer that to the next council meeting to give HR some time.
Mr. Clerk.
So through you, Mr. Chair, there is no item on the published agenda in regard to Brampton University, Brampton U. I think it's referred to in that report 11.2.1 in a sort of indirect way, but that item is proposed to be withdrawn. So there is no business on the agenda related to that. In regards to the item, I believe, Councillor Fortini, it may be item 15.2 on the closed agenda that you are requesting to be, I just want to clarify, be referred to the March 2nd City Council meeting or deferred to the March 9th Committee of Council meeting.
Yes, just to give them some time, yes. I had a conversation with them already.
Thank you, Councillor.
And the Brampton U, didn't I request that with the one coming about the Torbram in camera?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that may be business that may have been listed on the February 9th council agenda. That meeting was canceled. Therein, all that business at this point is tracking for the next council meeting, which is March 2nd. So those items that hadn't been dealt with on that February 9th meeting will appear on the March 2nd city council meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Fortini. Next, I have Councillor Policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I'll ask for the item 15.2 to be voted on separately. I would like to hear, there's no report, so I wanted to hear what staff have to say. So I'd rather keep that on the agenda to understand what's happening there. Oh, it's a discussion with Councillor Fortini, but I think if we can actually have that discussion, Councillor Fortini, and then possibly refer it back to staff after that, if you're okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. I just that we could have that discussion. It was about our certain staff and.
Councillor Policy, Councillor Fortini. So Councillor Policy has the floor. So we will have that item held for you, Councillor Policy. I see no other speak. Is that okay, Councillor Policy?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Fortini.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion moved by Councillor Williams to approve the agenda, and instead of seeking a recorded vote for this item, I'll ask if there is anyone opposed to the motion. Is there anyone opposed? There are no objections, so that carries. Next, we have declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Does any member have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered at today's meeting? I see no one, and so the clerk will so note for the minutes. Committee, as part of our consent motion process, I will read each agenda item that is subject to the consent motion, and any member may verbally identify the item to be held for debate during the meeting. Any item not held for debate will be considered as part of the consent motion and voted for approval. Any of the following agenda items will not be subject to the consent motion for approval: announcements, delegations, presentations, added new business items, member discussion items, member question period, public question period. And I will read now the relevant agenda items so that members can identify any items to be held for the debate. Item 8.2.1, a staff report on the initiation of subdivision assumption Key Road Developments, Inc., registered plan 43M 1835 north of Queen Street West and east of Mississauga Road, Ward 5. That is on consent. 8.2.2, staff report on the initiation subdivision assumption Norbram Developments, Inc., registered plan 43M 1654 in Ward 10. That is on consent. 8.2.3, staff report on the initiation of a subdivision assumption Kettle Point Investors, Inc., and Wolverley Construction, registered plan 43M 1946 in Ward 9. That is on consent. 8.2.4, staff report request to begin procurement 2022 road resurfacing Part A West and Part B East. That is also on consent. 8.2.5, a staff report on request to begin procurement electrical services at various City of Brampton facilities for a 3-year period. That is on consent. 8.2.6, a staff report amendment to request to begin procurement report for the hiring of general contractors for the construction of a new Victoria Park Arena and Sports Hall of Fame and the addition and renovation of Chris Gibson Recreation Center. We'll be holding that, Mr. Clerk. We'll be holding that for a delegation. We have 8.3.1, the minutes of the School Traffic Safety Council for February 3rd, 2022. On consent. That is held by Councillor Williams. Item 9.2.1, a staff report to begin procurement on the hiring of a general landscape contractor for the construction of Sandalwood Heights Adventure Park in Ward 10. On consent. 9.2.2, a staff report request to begin procurement on the hiring of a general landscape contractor for construction improvements to El Dorado Park in Ward 4. That is also on consent. We are holding item 9.2.3. Item 9.3.1, the minutes of the Branson Sports Hall of Fame Committee for February 3rd, 2022. That is on consent. Item 10.2.1, we'll be holding that item. Item 11.2.1 was withdrawn. Next, we have 12.2.1, a staff report, request to begin procurement and recruitment services for executive and specialized roles for a 3-year period. That is on consent. Item 12.2.2, a staff report.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Vicente, I asked for a hold on 12.2.1.
That will be held. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
We have item 12.2.2, staff report 2022 Brampton Tourism Event Funding Program. That is on consent.
Hold, please.
That is held.
Sorry, hold, please.
Held by Councillor Bowman. Item 15.1, open session meeting exception under the Municipal Act 2001. On consent. We have item 15.2, open session meeting exception under section 2392B and D of the Municipal Act 2001. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including a municipal or local board employee, and labor relations or employee negotiations. That is on consent. That is held by?
That was Councillor Pelletier. That's the one we were talking about with Councillor Fortini.
That has been held. So thank you. 15.3, open session meeting exception under section 2392K of the Municipal Act, the position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on behalf of the municipality or local board. That is held by Councillor Bowman. And item 15.4 is being held. The clerk will now summarize those items to be included on the consent motion for approval. Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to members of committee, the following items will be included in the consent motion. 8.2.1, 8.2.2, and 8.2.3. All three of them are initiation of subdivision assumption reports for various locations in wards 5, 10, and 9. Item 8.2.4, request to begin procurement for the 2022 road resurfacing project for East and West. Item 8.2.5, begin procurement report for electrical services at various city facilities for a 3-year period. Item 9.2.1, a request to begin procurement for hiring a landscape contractor for the construction of the Sandalwood Heights Adventure Park. Item 9.2.2, begin procurement report for hiring a landscape contractor for construction of improvements to El Dorado Park. Item 9.3.1, minutes from the Brampton Sports Hall of Fame Committee of February 3rd. And then finally, I did hear a note that item 15.1 in closed session was on consent, so that's personnel matters about an identifiable individual. That relates to, that's the confidential appendix to the public session report under 10.2.1, which was held for closed session. So just for clarity, right now I have the open session report held, but the closed session component on consent. Is it the will of committee to deal with that in closed, or to just deal with it as part of the consent motion?
I believe that was held by Councillor Pelletier.
That is the other item, 15.2, that Councillor Pelletier held.
So does anyone wish to hold the item?
No, I'd be happy moving it to consent now that the closed session item has been put in consent as well.
Thank you, Councillor.
So through you, Mr. Chair, that means item 10.2.1 will be added to the consent motion, which is the staff report on proposed late-term appointments to citizen advisory committees, as will the companion closed session appendix. And just for committee's information, that information will not become public until it goes to council on March 2nd.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. I have a motion moved by Councillor Pelletier to approve the consent motion, as we will ask for a recorded vote.
Members of committee, all in favor of the consent motion for those items identified for consent, please indicate. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Willens.
Yes.
Councillor Pelletier.
Yes.
Councillor Bowman.
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros.
Yes.
Councillor Williams.
Yes.
Councillor Fortini.
Yes.
Councillor Singh.
Yes.
Councillor Dillon.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Vicente.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously, 11-0.
Thank you very much. Our next item is 5.1, an announcement regarding Dan Dawson, Brampton firefighter, achievements in National Lacrosse League. Councillor Willens is the council sponsor for this announcement. Councillor Willens, you have the floor.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I thought it'd be appropriate to back on January 15th, I believe it was, we found out that Dan Dawson, one of our own Brampton Fire Department employees, I think Dan may be on the line with Chief Boyce. I don't know if we can get him up on the screen or not. But Dan achieved quite an accomplishment. He scored his 1,447th point, which moved into the second all-time scoring leader for the National Lacrosse League. Dan's had quite an accomplishment in this league. He's played for various teams, and this year marks his 20th year playing in the National Lacrosse League. And Dan holds a special part in my heart because my son was drafted up or brought up to the Junior A Excelsiors as a midget to bring up as a backup goalie. And Dan, among other players, were on that team. And it just speaks for himself. Dan is one gentleman. He's back then at 21-year-old. He sort of took the young ones under their arms and helped them through it. He was very encouraging to my son and a couple other midget boys that got called up to play on that. I think it was the 2001 or 2002 team. But it's quite an accomplishment for Dan. He's won many trophies. He's 40 years old as well, and his brother Paul, together they share 36 years in the National Lacrosse League. So I don't know if Chief Boyce wants to bring Dan up if he's in the call. It's quite an accomplishment because he's passed some great lacrosse players like John Gates Jr. or John Grant Jr. And John Grant Jr. was a well-respected lacrosse player for many years, and Dan has surpassed him, and he's only second to scoring, leading by John Tavares, the great hockey player's uncle. So if Chief could bring Dan up, maybe we could just sort of, if he wants to make a few comments. But thank you, Dan. You make us very, very proud, and it's great that you're one of our own employees here, along with your brother Paul. So I don't know if Chief's on the call. He said he was going to try and be on.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Willens. Dan is here with me, and we too are so proud of Dan and his accomplishments. And although he's a great lacrosse player, I'd say he's even a better firefighter and somebody that cares about the community so much. And we are so proud to have him on our team. If you can just hold on 1 second, I will put him on camera.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor, for taking the time, and everyone for allowing me to be acknowledged here. I don't really like the spotlight too often, but I do have to give recognition to this city. I was a young 16-year-old insecure kid, and I like to think this city made me Brampton strong, and holding true to that. Now I'm 40 years old, getting to represent the city in a different light for the fire department. I'm forever grateful for what sport has given me and allowed me to continue on with the fire department. So thank you everyone for your time and what you guys do for the city and the fire department.
And just one final comment, Dan, I know that your dad, Joe, was a very, very big fan of yours. Used to travel across the country to watch you and your brother play. And I know that Joe, I knew Joe as well because he was around the arena when I was around when my son was playing. I know that he would have been very proud of your accomplishments. So I know we miss him dearly. So good work, Dan. Thanks.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Willens. I see Mayor Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Visante, and thank you, Councillor Willens, for putting this item on the agenda. I'd spoken to Councillor Willens about this, and just want you to know, Dan, that you have a city that is proud of you, proud of your accomplishments in lacrosse, where certainly there is a passion for the sport in our city, and proud of your dedication to our city through Brampton Fire. But the accomplishments in lacrosse are incredible. And I know I've got Ron Evans, who comes into my office often and starts bragging about everything you do and everything that's happening in lacrosse. And just want you to know that you live in a city that is tremendously proud of you. And I should note, the Dawson family are pretty good hockey players too. I think there's a reason that Brampton Fire keeps on winning their charity games and their games against the police, because they have that large Dawson reach as well. So congratulations and all the best.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, recognize Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. Just very quickly, like Councillor Willens, my son was involved with the Excelsiors for a large number of years and was the practice warm-up goalie for quite a while, and has told me that Dan is one just true, fine, honest gentleman of the game. So I think, skills is one thing, but if you can be called a gentleman, that's another thing. So congratulations, Dan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and thank you so much, Dan. And Chief. Next, item 6.1, delegations regarding the proposed community sports group policy, which relates to staff report item 9.2.3, which we will bring forward and deal with the delegations. Our delegations today include Anand Desai and Claire Tucker-Reed, Monteith Brown Planning Consultants, working with the city staff on this matter. We have Martin Sasek, Director of Facilities, and Doran Gerard, President of the Brampton North Soccer Club, and Acacia Hill, Director of the Brampton Hill Skating Academy. We will deal with the staff report after delegations, so I'll ask the city's consultant. We will actually go to Commissioner Nader first to make a few introductory remarks. Commissioner Nader.
Thank you through the chair. Good morning, Mayor Brown and members of council. The delegation this morning is here to present a new draft community sports group policy, which identifies the level of support that the city provides to youth and adult sports groups that deliver quality sport development opportunities for all Brampton residents. In 2019, this policy review was initiated with a specific focus on local sports groups organizations to recognize the changes that have occurred in the city, including population growth and sport in Brampton since the latest policy was tweaked in 2010 and mostly unchanged since 1996. The third-party consultant group was hired to conduct a review of the old policy, engage with user groups, and conduct benchmarking of surrounding municipalities to formulate an updated sports group policy to better reflect the changing needs of the city. And today is the first step towards that update. With that, I'd like to introduce Anand Desai and Claire Tucker-Reed from Monteith Brown Planning Consultants to take us through the findings and presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Anand and Claire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of council, for having both Claire and myself here. I believe Claire has been able to resolve some audio challenges she was having earlier, but both of us are here, hopefully, to respond to any questions. Mr. Chair, we've been requested by city staff, because this is a city policy, that our presentation is about 10 minutes in length. Would it be okay if we requested an additional 5 minutes to our existing 5-minute allocation?
Extra time is granted. Please proceed.
Thank you so much. Okay, so the segue from Dan Dawson just now was perfect in many respects, and the comments from council in terms of the importance of sport, through all stages of life. And so the community sport group policy, as the commissioner just alluded to, has been being prepared over the last number of months, and maybe we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Essentially, the existing policy was drafted a number of years ago, and the city recognized the need to update that policy based on the changes in your population, your demographics, but also the changes in sport. Brampton is certainly a very different city than it was 20 years ago. And so ultimately, this new community sport group policy identifies the levels of support that the city provides to youth and adult sport groups. Very similar kind of philosophy in terms of your previous affiliation policy, although certainly with a number of tweaks that we have considered after a scan of research and best practices, benchmarking similar policies in other municipalities across Canada. Conducted 15 focus groups with both affiliated and non-affiliated, nonprofit and private for-profit sport providers. A survey was also sent out to those groups to obtain input. Members of council were involved early on in the process to provide some of your thoughts. And then we also carried out some workshops with city staff involved in the recreation portfolio. And a few months back, we presented the draft policy to community sport groups for their feedback. Next slide, please. So the intent of the policy really is to define the levels of support that are provided to sport groups by the city, and to really speak to the concept of working better together as a sport community, so that we can provide positive, meaningful experiences through sport for all age groups. The policy also aims to align with the principles of the Canadian Sport for Life model, from an introductory level to a more competitive stance, as well as speaking to the inclusion of all sport participants, regardless of their background, ability, Again, building on your city's, progressive and leading edge kind of approach to diversity and inclusion. Next slide, please. So the new CSG policy is similar to the existing policy that's in place in that it categorizes sport groups based on their residency, ages served, and their business status. So again, the latter would be a not-for-profit or for-profit. However, the CSG policy, the community sport group policy, no longer limits groups to only two options. So whereas before it was you would either be an affiliate or not an affiliate, instead, sport groups, based on what they told us, would be tiered. And so you'll see through the slides that follow, the tiers are 5 tiers consisting of youth, 3 youth categories and 2 adult categories, largely segmented by not-for-profit and for-profit status. Next slide, please. So for the Youth A category, these are organizations that would have be registered as not-for-profits or have charitable status. They would be required to align with a national or provincial sport organization, so an overarching governing body. These would provide a house league or a Learn To program. And one thing that groups told us in the past was that in the existing policy, to be an affiliate, one would have to have 99% Brampton residents. Certain groups said that that could be cumbersome or, challenge their sustainability because they would need to draw from a regional base to support their teams and their programs. And therefore, we have, the new CSG policy now requires a minimum of 80% Brampton residents overall, and 90% for residency for those house league programs. There are minimum registered participants built into each one of the categories. We want to make sure that they align to the Human Rights Code, have mechanisms to include low-income participants, as well as participating in Brampton Sport Alliance discussions. So the supports that would be assigned to these Youth A organizations would be the first priority of booking sport facilities, receipt of staff liaison services as required, an ability to apply for liability insurance if they do not otherwise have it, provision of meeting rooms, which is consistent with past policy, as well as promotion and publicity as arranged with city staff. Next slide, please. Youth B similarly would be not-profit or charitable in their status, but they would not be necessarily required to be aligned with a national or provincial governing body, though it would certainly be encouraged. They would provide a house league or a competitive program, and very similar items in terms of their residency, number of participants, involvement in BSA, and alignment with proactive inclusivity process mechanisms. The supports would be the second priority of booking sport facilities, and then the same types of other supports as was just described with the Youth A. Next slide, please. Youth B for-profit, as the name suggests, would be more for the for-profit or commercial enterprises delivering sport in your city. Again, an encouragement for alignment or affiliation with a governing body of sport. And again, the same kind of residency requirements. These folks would receive the third priority booking of sport facilities. Next slide, please. So we move on now to the adult sport organizations who would receive the fourth priority of booking facilities. They would also receive staff liaison, provision of meeting rooms, and promotion as arranged with city staff. And so these also would have a residency requirement of 80% of Brampton residents if they were to receive supports as affiliates. Next slide, please. And then the adult for-profit would receive the fifth priority booking of sport facilities, and their supports, you can see relative to the others, are a little bit more limited in terms of what is provided to them. Next slide, please. So the application process, I mean, ultimately it's a very similar process as is in place today, as well as in other communities. Ultimately, the policy spells out who groups are to contact, that they would apply for this status every 3 years, and a number of annual requirements to ensure that they would be in compliance with the policy. Next slide, please. So just in summary of the major changes between this updated policy compared to the policy that has guided you for the last 20 or so years, really we are retitling the policy from affiliation policy to a community sport group policy, in that we are recognizing that multiple folks can apply to be community sport groups. Instead of in or out, we would have then 5 categories, and supports would be indexed to the degree that that group aligns with city values regarding long-term athlete development, residency rates, ages served, and more. I already touched on the previous residency rate requirement, and again, recognizing what groups told us, have adjusted that to assist them moving forward. And allocation continues to be higher for not-for-profit youth organizations. It's important to note that, this policy is not intended to specify individual groups, by their name, for example, how much time they would be allocated. Our scan of benchmarking affiliation policies elsewhere, as well as best practice, one would assign a priority in this affiliation policy by category, but the actual details of where individual groups fit would be addressed through a facility allocation policy. The rates that they would pay would be addressed through a rates and fee policy, and so forth. So next slide, please. With the number of groups, this is another important point that we heard from groups. The previous affiliation policy only allowed 1 sport group per type of sport, whereas this new policy would allow multiple organizations of the same sport to qualify. Commercial groups were not permitted under the old policy, and they are now being included as one of the tiers. As well as communication, youth groups continue to have the same opportunity to contribute feedback through BSA and other city discussions. Printing services, this is probably a sign of the times from the old policy. Those would no longer be offered through the city. Next slide, please. So ultimately, the next steps are to receive any kind of feedback from City Council and our committee today, and upon approval, city staff will work with the groups to determine categorization under the policy. And city staff will then, with this as an umbrella policy, review other policies for alignment with the community sport group policy, such as allocation, rates and fees, promotional practices, and so forth. So with that, that concludes the presentation. We would, both Claire and myself would be happy to address any questions from committee today as it relates to the policy itself. City staff may provide additional insights in terms of if you have questions about the previous policy or how they are planning on kind of rolling out the implementation and the next steps of the community sport group policy. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Anand and Claire. Next, we'll move on to delegation by Martin Sasek and Doran Gerard, the Brampton North Soccer Club. Welcome, Martin and Doran.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Perfectly, thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, so I'd like to start off by thanking you for hearing us this morning. As was stated, my name is Martin Sasek. I'm the field coordinator for Brampton North Soccer. And also with me to answer any questions, or I may refer one or two to, is the president of our club, Doran Gerard. And I'd just like to take a moment just to read a little preamble that we have set out, providing history of our club and organization for perhaps some of the council members that haven't been aware of us in the past. So I'd like to say good morning to Mayor Brown and members of council. And again, my name is Martin Sasek, field coordinator for the Brampton North Soccer Club. And I'm happy to speak to council this morning and offer our support for the new community sports policy. At this point, I would like to take a moment to provide, as I said, a brief history of our organization and the services that our soccer club at Brampton North has provided for Brampton residents over the last 20 years. Next slide, please. Established in 2001 to accommodate the growing demand for indoor soccer, as at the time only Ken Giles' facility provided this at Steeles and Kennedy. Next slide. I think I go to the next slide. We at Brampton North Soccer in cooperation with the Peel Agricultural Society funded and developed a 35,000 square foot indoor playing field at the Brampton Fairgrounds on Hart Lake Road, otherwise known as the Brampton Fairgrounds Organization. That inaugural year, we provided indoor soccer to boys and girls ages 3 to 17, as well as leagues for adults, and in addition to providing rental space for several community organizations such as Brams United, Brampton East, and Bryce Soccer Academy, to just name a few. Next slide, please. Over the next few years, the popularity of our programs and quality of services led to an increase of our indoor registration and subsequently to an expansion to outdoor programs as well. As of 2021, Brampton North Soccer registers on average of approximately 2,200 to 2,500 youth players and over 1,200 adults annually, both indoor and outdoor. Next slide, please. But at Brampton North Soccer, we not only provide services and a first-rate quality of experience for our members, but we also have been at the forefront of innovations in soccer, many of which have been subsequently been adopted over the years by other community soccer clubs in Brampton. We were the first to initiate soccer programs for preschool-age children, 3 and 4 years old, excuse me, which became popularly known as our Tot Shots program. Other notable innovations are Skill of the Week, a common curriculum, pregame training for house leagues. We also initiated on-field paid managers, and currently we have adopted reversible house league jerseys. This offers not only savings for members as they can be reused, but the obvious practicality of colors and also recognition of our club. The next slide, please. Yeah, and at Brampton North Soccer, we're not only on the field, but we are off the field as well, providing and being involved in several community activities. To name a few, we do annual food drive for the Knights Table, community reach out program, which delivered essentials to those needing assistance during the COVID crisis, Play Wash Car Wash, which supports low-income families, our daycare introductory soccer program, and fundraising for many charitable organizations, and also involvement with other community-based businesses. Next slide, please. And finally, our annual awards day, an innovation in itself, adopted by other clubs over the past years, provides an opportunity for players and their parents and members of the business community to all come together to share in the game's achievements and a marketplace of Brampton-based businesses to exhibit their products and services while supporting our organization and our members as well. I believe I have another slide, if we could add that in. Our next slide, please. Okay, I guess that's the last one there. I'll just leave that there. So at this point, I would just like to speak to, and again, offer our support for the change in the current policy and the direction that we believe we are now moving to support multiple groups, multiple sports groups, that is, in Brampton. As over the last 20 years, our organization's primary difficulty has been the acquirement of public fields and the inflated cost to non-affiliate members to accommodate our outdoor programs, even though 98% of our membership are Brampton residents. So we at Brampton North feel this is often associated with a stigma or a misconception that private sports organizations are profiteering. But I would just like to take this opportunity for council to say that we believe this couldn't be further from the truth, as inherently both for and not-for-profit organizations operate and perform fundamentally in the same way. We collect registrations for equipment, field space, insurance, uniforms, administrations, referees, and other staff. And the lion's share, if any, of profits are then reinvested into the club to maintain the quality of service and, of course, competitiveness. And I might add that if anything, private organizations with personal investment and interests are often more compelled to ensure the quality of their services and accountability and transparency. So therefore, in closing, I would like to take again the opportunity to say that while Brampton North Soccer strongly supports the revised policy and its opportunities for us to be more inclusive in the allocation of fields for our youth programs, we still feel that it falls short of the mark for a true egalitarian use of public facilities, as equal pricing that we and our resident members and as taxpayers contribute to the development and maintenance of. We find that favoritism of certain groups, whether it be for corporate structure or political affiliation, in our opinion, is counterproductive towards good growth and good services that naturally benefit our participants. We're hopeful that in the near future, all legitimate sports organizations meeting the criteria, of course, for the city may have greater and equal opportunities to use playing fields and venues that belong to all of us. And having said that, I would again remind Council, our president is here as well. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer them on behalf of our club.
Thank you very much, Martin and Doran. We'll move on to our next delegation from Acacia Hill, the director of the Brampton Hill Skating Academy. Acacia.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me here and taking time to listen. I'll wait till my slide loads up.
Acacia, we'll bring it up here momentarily.
Okay.
We just had a technical
in the meantime,
issue.
I can start. My name is Acacia Hill. I am the director and owner of Brampton Hill Skating Academy. I am the first Black-owned, female-owned skating school in all of Canada. My school, being in Brampton, is creating history. Our school is currently training out of the Susan Fennell Arena, and the goal of my school is to make sport of figure skating more accessible and equitable for all. Currently, my school has provincial and national competitive athletes, and we are also growing the grassroots level as well.
Acacia, just a moment. It's Peter. Sorry, we haven't started your time. We have a technical issue, so we're just...
Is the slide working? Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, just bear with us a moment. We've just have to change over to a backup computer.
Okay, no problem.
I don't have it. Acacia, just a moment. We're just going to bring it up now. I'm just bringing up the backup. My apologies for the delay, members of committee. So I can bring it up now. Please proceed, Acacia. My apologies.
No worries. Good morning. I'll start over. Thank you for taking the time to have me here. My name is Acacia Hill. I am the director and owner of Brampton Hill Skating Academy. We are the first Black female-owned skating school in all of Canada. My school, being here in Brampton, is creating history. Our school is currently training out of the Susan Fennell Arena, and the goal of my school is to make the sport of figure skating more accessible and equitable. Currently, my school has a couple of provincial and national competitive athletes, and we are growing the grassroots levels up as well. Next slide, please. When you think of winter sport, what comes to mind? There should be a lot of sports that are coming to mind right now, especially because the Olympics are on, but I bet some of the first sports you're thinking of is hockey. Next slide, please. There are 1.46 million people residing in the Peel area, approximately 663,000 people in Brampton. There are only 7 figure skating schools in all of Peel, and only 2 specifically in the Brampton area. My school being one of them. 3 out of 7 skating schools in Peel have solely their own designated ice space. When you compare that to hockey, teams, and programming, the number of figure skating schools in Peel and specifically Brampton is extremely low. There is about 25 plus hockey schools and programs in Peel and about 15 of them in Brampton area. This graph demonstrates that the skating school to hockey school ratio it's quite low. In Brampton, we have 13 facilities, some have multiple ice pads, and only 1 facility is designated for figure skating currently, and that is at the Acacia Arena, which my school is not operating out of. We have 650, next slide please. We have 650,000 plus people in Brampton and only 1 skating school to cater to and has access right now to the affiliate program and to this and I think this is a detriment, as you know, we have a vastly growing population in Brampton. Our federation for figure skating is called Skate Canada, which Canadian athletes need to be a part of if they want to compete in figure skating. Yes, the city of Brampton has figure skating learn to skate programs, but once Brampton residents complete that program, there's no way or room or areas for them to find a figure skating school, as there's only 1 currently right now. And they often have no guidance on where to go once they've completed the Learn to Skate City program. When they do find out that there is a club within the Brampton area, figure skating club, the programs are too full. Also in Skate Canada, many of our programs are capped at 60 participants in the Learn to Skate program. That means a club could potentially offer maybe 420 participants per skating term if they were to run 1 program daily throughout the week. As kids move up in the levels, the participant size has to decrease for safety on the ice. This demonstrates that one club cannot handle the Brampton population. Next slide, please. Currently, my school is not an affiliate member, which means we get last picks of ice time selections. We do not have a consistent or designated on-ice or dryland space to train on. Trying to have a consistent schedule is very difficult, which causes us to delete programming, even though we have a lot of interest. 1 club currently getting subsidized ice costs in Brampton makes it extremely difficult to compete, and in turn again, leaves the Brampton residents without options, which either turns them away from the sport of figure skating or forces them to join a skating club outside of Brampton. My school differentiates with the other skating club that's being offered or run out of Cassie Campbell, as they are focusing more on the synchro and recreational stream. My school will be focusing on, yes, recreational skaters, but we also have competitive program and theater programming. The other club in Brampton at Cassie Campbell, their ice is subsidized and considerably lower than ours. Our club is paying an excess of $300 an hour for ice time, and the cost makes it prohibitive for parents to enroll their kids in our school currently right now. Right now, the Olympics are on and people love to see Canadians performing. If the entry level cost is high, you're not going to get the success at the other end because people are turned off by the price. The reason why we see so much talent coming out of Quebec is because sports is heavily subsidized there. We would love to see more Brampton residents being represented in the world ranks as well. The cost my athletes are paying exceeds $50 per hour for them to train. And most of my athletes need to be training about 3 hours a day. So as you can see, that is very, very expensive. Next slide, please. Becoming an affiliate member, BHSA can cater to more of the growing population in Brampton. We have the opportunity to have first selections on ice bookings, where we can have a consistent schedule and we do not have to delete programming. Our ice would be subsidized and more affordable, and we'll have more new Canadians willing to try the sport. We'll have visibility throughout the Brampton programming books. designated off-ice and on-ice space. Distribution of the facilities will be a little bit more equitable. Storage to store our gear as we're lugging them back and forth daily. Adequate training for our national and provincial athletes. And we may be able to set up our world-class system that I'm currently running out of my house sometimes within the facility that many figure skating schools around the world are using and have found great success with the development of their athletes' training. And if we have that in our city, our figure skaters will be more geared to compete, if not surpass all of our competitors Ontario-wide, Canada-wide, and more. Next slide, please.
Just a reminder that you're past the 5 minutes, so if you could wrap up shortly.
Yep, I'm just wrapping up right now. Like I said, my school already has a provincial and national athletes. We want to be able to help these Brampton athletes find more success in the sport, and the grassroots coming up, we want to be able to help them have fun, affordable, safe, and competitive space to train in. The affiliate program will ensure this. Again, my school is historic to figure skating, to the figure skating community and to Canada, and being the first Black-owned, female-owned skating club in all of Canada, and having it here in Brampton, I think we need to celebrate that and really help push us to be a part of this affiliate policy. Thank you so much for having me here and for listening.
Thank you very much, Acacia. That was really great. We have a number of speakers on our list speaking to the report as well. So I will begin with Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the groups that came in today to delegate. Sports is critical to the city of Brampton, as we have all seen over the past term of this council and last term of council, and having Dan Dawson show up today. So I'm glad to see that these sports groups want to participate in the Alliance and want to get some ice time. We did have a meeting with the Brampton Sports Alliance on Monday night, and that was with Ed Nikoloff and Rob Ferroni were there as well. They just received this report the day before when it came out on the agenda, so they didn't know it was coming either. And they had asked, and I believe Ed and Rob are also in favor of this. They have asked if they can defer this to the March 9th meeting so that they can have time to go over the report and they can have time to meet with Ed and Rob in between. This is just a draft version of the policy, so we're not deferring or approving a final version of any policy. We're still in the draft stages, and so I see that Councillor Willens is on the floor, so I will hold the deferral until after Councillor Willens speaks. But as long as Ed and Rob have no issue with that, that's what I plan to do. So I'll let Councillor Willens speak, and then I'll put the deferral on the floor. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Recognize Councillor Willens.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bowman, for holding the deferral. Thank you to the delegates for coming in. Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to ask for too, because I have some, there's no doubt that we need an updated policy, affiliation policy, and but there is some questions that I had, but I can wait. My questions can wait because they were more on the enforcement part of it about non-residents playing on certain teams. It's not about the people that want to be affiliated or want to ice time. It's more about who's going to enforce. So I can wait for the deferral because I think staff have just seen this, so I'm happy with wait until March. If Councillor Bowman wants to defer this, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Recognize Councillor Williams.
Thank you to you, Chair. I will wait for deferral, and I do support that. I just want to thank the delegates for coming in. I think it's important that we do have a policy that is equitable. The benefit to a lot of these leagues is, once our kids do try out some of these activities, these sports, and get used to it and want to try things like hockey, figure skating and such, they do have to go to a league to play. And so I do support, seeing that all of these groups who want to do training sessions and so on and so forth have the ability to get the field time, the ice time. So I support the deferral, and I will also just wait until March to have some more specific questions to the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Recognize Councillor Policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think what I'm gathering is somebody's about to move deferral, and I'm okay with that. In going through the report, and I will have questions when this does come back, but after listening to the delegations and going through the report, I still fully don't understand how it affects the kids. I don't know who comes before us and as a either profit or not for profit, and I think that does have something to do with it. But how it affects the kids and how many kids it affects is ultimately what I'm trying to what I'm looking for here. When I hear a delegation that has some issues with not being allowed or not being awarded an opportunity to for bookings, especially at Cassie Campbell, where it's our only figure skating, very proud of that figure skating rink that we have, yet they're practicing at a Susan Fennell Sportsplex. Like, that to me doesn't make sense. So, my understanding of Skate Canada at Cassie Campbell and what we've talked in the past about the off-ice training that we provide for them there. Also looking for, I believe at one time we were talking about adding an extra room or providing them with an opportunity to house some of their equipment. And I'm a little bit ignorant to the fact that I don't know what kind of equipment that you would require at on ice figure skating for practices. I don't understand, so I'd like to understand kind of how does this come to be, where you have one particular group that has that takes all the time, when you have another group that is somewhere else. We have, I guess, lots of rinks in Brampton that can be considered as second class to figure skating, with the first class being Cassie Campbell. So where's the mix with that? So lots of questions that I have, but I really don't see in this report how it affects the kids of Brampton, and that's ultimately what I need to know. A lot of the times that I have residents' complaints about Brampton Minor Hockey or Brampton Baseball or even Brampton Soccer. We have nothing to do with those sports-run organizations. We provide a subsidy, and that's pretty much it. We don't get into the politics or the operations of these youth programs. Yet, I think a lot of people, because they use the name the City of Brampton, feel like it's on us to be able to fix any of the issues that they're going through. So. I think with all those comments and some of the other questions that I've heard, when this comes back, I think we need a deeper dive into how essentially this affects Bramptonians. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bushy. Would you like staff to address your questions now or in the report?
If they want to, or because there's other councillors, I guess, that are asking questions as well, I think it'd probably be more appropriate to have one of those councillors, can't be Councillor Bowman now because he spoke to it, but maybe if another councillor can jump on to move the deferral on behalf of Councillor Bowman. And then when that comes back, maybe staff can address some of the comments, some of the delegations. I'd also like to know why there are people reaching out to Councillor Bowman saying we didn't know about it, yet we have groups that are here today. We're obviously fully prepared to have this before us. So I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Seeing my speakers
Can
list,
I speak to that, Councillor Vicente, or Chair Vicente?
Say again.
Can I speak to why the Sports Alliance didn't know about this report?
Please proceed.
Yeah, just to Councillor Paleshi's question about the Sports Alliance. The Sports Alliance works with, and was part of this whole decision-making process. but they did not receive this report until it was put on the agenda. They had no idea that the report was coming forward, even though they were part of putting this whole report together. So that's why they have asked for a deferral, so that they can get more information and speak to the people who put the report together. Thanks.
Thank you. I have other speakers on the list. Councillor Willens.
Yes, Councillor Bowman pretty much clarified what I was going to say, because I think Councillor Bowman is our council rep on the Sports Alliance, so that's why he would have this information about the staff and Sports Alliance contacting him, because he's our rep. So as with any, I always appreciate whoever reps on a committee to bring the report to council. So that's all I was going to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Before I go to Councillor Fortini, I believe Commissioner Nader wishes to speak.
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. If I can just refer this to Anand Patel, the Director of Recreation, just to clarify the councillor's questions around process and how this came about. Anand?
Thanks, Mayor. So through the chair, a bunch of questions. So I'm just going to address the process one for the delegates reaching out. We shared the information once it was published on the agenda that this report was coming forward, and the delegations reached out to the clerk's office to delegate. So it was not the intention to not share it. It was just to make sure that it was on the agenda and then share. So just wanted to clarify that piece.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Councillor Fortini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think they needed someone to then speak to defer, so I'm happy to defer this.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a motion to receive the delegations and to defer the staff report. Item 9.2.3. Is there anyone opposed? Well, that carries. Thank you. Our next delegation is Sylvia Roberts, speaking to reports on the community recreation facilities. Sylvia, are you there?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
All right, hello, my name is Sylvia Roberts. This is regarding a report about a request for procurement at Victoria Park Arena and the Chris Gibson Recreation Center. This report was added yesterday. This item is about tens of millions of dollars. First question, there's a couple of questions for council. Should a report about tens of millions of dollars in spending be added less than 24 hours before the meeting? Does this seem appropriate to you? There's a couple more fundamental issues. These were put in the process over a year ago. Since then, things have changed somewhat. For example, in the area around Bramley Go, has the planned population versus 2 years ago projected to go up by infinity %, because the current plan in the secondary plan does not include residential. The MZO thing that you all voted to approve is like 12,000 people. This doesn't necessarily seem like a huge amount until you realize that the block of residential between bounded by Clark, Bramley, and Dixie has about 10,000 people, which is serviced by, I believe it's just the Victoria Park Arena, which is supposed to be serviced by the Victoria Park Arena. So effectively, you're looking at doubling the service population for that, but I don't believe that it's actually been accounted for in the construction of the new facility. Likewise, for Chris Gibson, it isn't quite as close to where the new development is, but it's still relatively close to downtown. We're planning to add a huge number of people to the downtown. Where are there going to be recreation facilities? The overall Chris Gibson site for all the recreation stuff is basically the size of the block from Theater Lane, Chapel Street, Wellington, and then George Street and Nelson. It's a decent sized block. It's a fairly large thing. And if you're looking to add all those people in the downtown, they do need recreation facilities. So since we already own the Chris Gibson site, has staff considered how we're going to meet the needs of the people who are desired to be moved, who want to be added to downtown, how they're going to be met, and whether the Chris Gibson site should be expanded a bit further to be able to meet those needs? It's about 1 kilometer from downtown when you're looking at the trails, which it is a little bit of a walk, but if someone is on a bike, for example, the city is talking about how we want lots of bikes. A kilometer on bikes is not a big deal. So it's reasonably close to the downtown, but is the planned expansion sized so we can accommodate the people downtown? I would really like this report to be referred later and asking staff for information like how much is this going to cost? What is the planning for the sites for how we're going to meet the recreation needs for downtown and near Victoria Park, and whether these two will actually be suitable for that, or whether in 5 years the city is going to get involved in a protracted struggle fighting with developers to secure community space when we could have just made these facilities a little bit larger beforehand. And since we would be upsizing it for growth, finance would have to check on this, but I believe you could use DCs to help fund the expansion because it would be specifically growth oriented and anticipating future development. Thank you. It's my delegation.
I don't see any questions from members of committee. Is there anyone on staff who wishes to address the delegation? I see none. So I'll need a motion from member committee to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Frattini. All in favor, any opposed? And so that carries. We'll deal with the report at the time when it comes in the agenda. Thank you. Members of committee, our next item is 7.1, Government Relation Matters. Tara Hunter from the CAO's office is here with a presentation for committee on Government Relation Matters. Welcome, Tara.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
All right, I'm trying to get my video. All right, I think you might just hear me and not see me. My apologies.
Thank you.
So, thank you, and through you, Chair. As a member of the Public Affairs team, I will be delivering the Government Relations presentation this morning. Today's presentation provides operational awareness to Council and a general update to the public on recent regional, provincial, and federal developments. Next slide, please. Beginning with the region of Peel, there are several regional committee meetings happening tomorrow. The Public Affairs team have reviewed the agendas for items of interest to share with committee. Next slide, please. So item 6.1 of the Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Committee agenda is an information report concerning the region of Peel's approach to Indigenous engagement. We wanted to bring it to the attention of committee because the City of Brampton is in a similar position to the region of Peel and is currently working towards building relationships with Indigenous governments and bands to advocate for truth and reconciliation. This work is ongoing. Next slide, please. Moving on to provincial announcements. On Monday, the provincial government announced a further easing of public health measures related to COVID-19. Of interest to the general public and Brampton businesses is, as of February 17th, social gathering limits will be increased to 50 people indoors and 100 people outdoors. Organized public event capacity limits are increased to 50 people indoors and no limit outdoors. And capacity limits are lifting in certain public settings, such as restaurants, gyms, and cinemas. Also of note, the provincial government indicated that effective March 1st, proof of vaccination requirements will be lifted alongside the lifting of capacity limits in all indoor public settings. Next slide, please. Continuing with COVID-related provincial updates, booster dose eligibility is being expanded to include youth aged 12 to 17 years of age. And last week, the province announced it is expanding access to free rapid test kits. So for the next 8 weeks, 5 million free rapid COVID-19 kits will be distributed to pharmacies and grocery stores each week for members of the public to access. It will be limited to 1 kit per household and while supplies last. And lastly, The Ontario government announced an extended deadline of September 30th, 2022 for residents to renew their Ontario health cards. So until then, all health cards will continue to be accepted regardless of their expiration date. Next slide, please. Moving on to federal matters, the Public Affairs team is working with city staff on the city's federal pre-budget submission. The city's submission will focus on building better transit, expanding active transportation, building greener, resilient communities, jobs, and growth. Turning to federal updates, the local lockdown program and Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit programs have been extended by 1 month to March 12th. These programs provide wage subsidies to employers and assistance to workers affected by lockdowns and other workplace capacity limitations. And finally, we would be remiss not to mention that on February 14th, the federal government declared a public order emergency under the Emergencies Act to end disruptions, blockades, and the occupation of the city of Ottawa. The declaration will provide new abilities to law enforcement, financial institutions, and others to address the current disruptions. Next slide, please. So moving on from updates related to government announcements, the city has sent a letter to provincial government to continue our advocacy efforts to review and reform auto insurance and bring forward Bill 42. Through our colleagues in strategic communications, a media release was also issued earlier this week. We would also like to acknowledge the great work of the Economic Development Office coordinating advocacy efforts in an automotive roundtable held virtually yesterday with Stellantis stakeholders and all levels of government to raise awareness for the need for large-scale investment at the Stellantis Brampton assembly plant in order to transition to produce electric vehicles. The city has submitted its formal pre-budget submission to the provincial government, and as previously reported to committee and council, the submission outlined key priorities of the city, including healthcare, transit, and infrastructure. There are currently multiple funding opportunities open and that are accepting applications and are being pursued by staff. Provincially, the Inclusive Communities Grant from the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility, and federally, the Active Transportation Fund and Low Carbon Economy Fund. So these applications are being pursued and they all are due next month. A report to Committee of Council is planned for next month to provide a substantive update on the external funding program that includes grants, sponsorship, and revenue generating advertising. I would like to highlight that the Corporate Projects, Policy, and Liaison team are in active, regular, and frequent communications with our partners at Ryerson, University of Guelph Humber, and the William Osler Health System on various priorities identified by Council. Next slide, please. We will wrap up today's presentation with the Association of Municipalities. So AMO's pre-budget submission to the province has taken the position that capital funding for hospital infrastructure and the local share formula requires review by the province to reduce the financial impact on municipalities across Ontario. So in support of their position, AMO has released a proposed resolution for consideration by municipalities. Staff are reviewing the proposed resolution and will provide further information for Council's consideration at an upcoming meeting. Next slide, please. The final item of business is AMO's call to action on joint and several liability. Supplementary information was provided on February 4th for committee members to review. Clerks has the motion ready now, should members choose to consider it. So with that, I will conclude today's government relations presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tara. I don't see any members on my list. So I will ask for Councillor Singh, you just popped on.
Yes, can we go back to the AMO slide quickly? I did read this. It was presented before and the motion that's ready to go. I'm just wondering, what's staff's recommendation on this? I've noticed a lot of municipalities have supported. Is this a big issue for the city of Brampton? And if so, does staff recommend supporting this motion?
I don't know if Jonathan Brewer is available to comment, but based on the, is he?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Jonathan is not in the session at the moment.
No. Okay. So based on the information that was supplied by RISC, the recommendation would be yes, this is an issue for the municipality.
Okay, so staff is recommending it, and can we elaborate on that? So before council, if we do move this, council knows how it has impacted the city of Brampton. Or if you would like time, maybe we can come back to council. It doesn't get ratified then, with a brief, brief sort of summary of how this has impacted the city of Brampton and why staff would recommend we move forward with this.
Might I suggest, Councillor, that we have this motion referred to council and staff can provide additional information at that time for council to consider?
Yeah, I did see this a few months ago and I did ask for that information. I'm happy the motion came back. Maybe it doesn't have to be a report, just a verbal rationale for why staff is suggesting. It is a little bit of a complicated situation. I've done a little bit of research, but I think I would like to hear staff's perspective.
Thank you. So the clerk takes that as a motion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So next we have Councillor Willens.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I'm sorry, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment. I just want to reiterate the fact that keep us informed on what's going on with 413. I know after my motion to reconsider got defeated, the mayor did make some media comments saying that we are going to push the boulevard. So just keep us abreast if you hear anything in regards to the 413. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So members of committee, we have a motion to receive the report from Councillor Pleshy, but we also have a motion to refer the AMO motion to council. So we'll deal with the AMO motion first. Is there anyone opposed? That's moved by Councillor Singh. There's no one opposed, so that carries. So next, moving receipt of the Government Relation Matters report by Councillor Pleshy. Anyone opposed? And so that carries. Members of the committee, our next item is 7.2, an update on the COVID-19 emergency by Mayor Brown. Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente. A very brief update today. We're continuing to see an encouraging picture in the hospital. 3 weeks ago, we had 110 COVID-19 patients. 2 weeks ago, 70. A week ago, 38. And now we're down to 21. In light of this encouraging news, the federal government is lifting many of the restrictions on the aviation sector. Good news for Pearson Airport, where we have 50,000 individuals employed and 300,000 indirectly. The province is lifting their passport system at public facilities, so that affects the city of Brampton on March 1st, and the reopening timetable has been expedited. Certainly, Dr. Lowe indicated that all the indicators that we follow, wastewater, positivity rate, are all encouraging. And so there's a reason for a level of optimism right now. So that's a good news update, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Recognize Councillor Willens.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and I'll try to spin this around as a COVID updated related. Thank you, Mayor. For your update, just to inform council that we did have our ski day yesterday for the William Osler Health System, and I was speaking, I was speaking to some of the hospital staff that were there. Everything's good. We had the highest attendance ever in the history of the event, and we were able to raise over $110,000 that day, a one-day ski day at Calvin Ski Club. So thank you, everybody, for getting the word out from the city staff and from other councillors, and especially to Jen Vivian. She was our liaison between the club, our own employee here in the BEC. It was a great day on the slopes, and I was happy to see that the amount of money we raised. So I think that kind of spins it around a little bit, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So we have a motion moved by Councillor Willens to receive the update by Mayor Brown on the COVID-19 emergency. All in favor, any opposed? That carries. Next committee, we're moving on to Public Works and Engineering. Our next item is 8.2.6, the staff report regarding the amendment to request to begin procurement report for the hiring of general contractors for the construction of the new Victoria Park Arena, Sports Hall of Fame, and the addition and renovation of Chris Gibson Recreation Center. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the staff report? If so, please use the chat function. I see no speakers, so I have a motion moved by Councillor Williams to receive the report and the recommendations. Is there anyone opposed?
And that's approving the recommendations.
And that is to move the report and approve the recommendations as clarified by the city clerk. Is there anyone opposed? That carries. Next, I believe, is item 8.5, Councillor question period for this section of the agenda. Do any members have questions?
My apologies. 8.3.1, School Traffic Safety Council, Councillor Williams.
My apologies, Mr. Clerk. So we held 8.3.1, the School Traffic Safety Council, by Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams? Councillor Williams, did you hold 8.3.1, the minutes of the Brampton School Traffic Safety Council for February?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you to the chair. I held it because I had I had a conversation with the members, and there is a motion, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember what the motion is, but it's a motion to see social media tiles used to promote the site inspections that the school traffic safety does, to encourage people to, put forward any concerns that they have for intersections in their community that needs to be looked at. So if I can move that, not as a recommendation from the committee, but as a motion put forward to council.
Very good. We have a motion moved by Councillor Williams. You have the motion on the screen. Do I have any speakers to the motion? I see none. So we have a motion moved by Councillor Williams, as indicated on the screen. Is there anyone opposed? That carries. And we have a motion to receive the remainder of the reports of the Brampton School Traffic Safety Council for February 3rd, listed as item 8.3.1, moved by Councillor Williams as well. Is there anyone opposed? And that too carries. So next we move on to council question period. Do any members of council have questions with regards to today's Public Works and Engineering section? I see none. So we move on to public question period. Mr. Clerk, we have no questions?
No questions.
So with that, we'll then move on to, I'll pass the chair to Councillor Bowman to chair the Legislative Services section of the committee agenda.
Community Services.
My apologies.
Oh, sorry.
My apologies, Councillor Bowman. We're moving on to Community Services section, chaired by Councillor Santos. Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Councillor Vicente. We are now in the Community Services section of the agenda. I believe everything was put into consent or dealt with during the delegation portion. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk?
That's correct.
Okay, so do any councillors have any questions regarding this section? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, are there any public questions that you've received via email?
There are none.
Thank you very much. That brings us to Legislative Services and over to Chair Bowman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Santos. Legislative Services section, there are no staff presentations. The one report that was on there was put into consent after the approval of the consent for the closed session agenda item. We have no other new business. I do not believe we have any correspondence. Mr. Clerk, Councillor question period. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, do we have any public questions?
There are none.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. That concludes the legislative services section of the agenda. I will now hand the chair over to Councillor Medeiros for economic development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Bowman. I will now go to item 11.1.1, staff presentation regarding an updated workforce development projects. And I will hand it over to Martin Bowl, our Sector Manager, Food Processing, Logistics, and MedTech Economic Development Office. Welcome, Martin.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to confirm, and I don't know, Claire, if you're there, I don't see Martin in the session.
Hi, I am here. I will get started while we grab Martin for you. So I'm happy to start the presentation off. If I could have the next slide, please. And then as soon as he joins, he can take over. So as many of you have heard economic development say in the past several meetings we've had and updates the last couple of months, especially the economic impact through COVID, one of the issues issues we are hearing from businesses on every visit is the lack of workforce, whether that is the inability to find the right workforce or to retain the workforce. That is becoming a huge issue for businesses in Brampton. That is not an exclusive issue for Brampton. That is certainly something that is happening throughout the country. And in fact, speaking with some U.S. economic development directors as well, it's something that they are facing. So economic development has embarked upon a couple of projects, this being one of them. We partnered as part of a workforce review in the food and beverage sector with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. There were interviews done with Brampton-based businesses that we helped coordinate, and various pieces of information coming from that, which I will share with you on the coming slides. If I could have the next slide, please. The food processing and workforce development project, as I mentioned, that is something that we did with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and the Food and Beverage Ontario organization. And the other project that we are looking at is the logistics sector. We have also heard about extensive workforce shortages in the logistics sector, and we have partnered with the Peel Halton Workforce Development Group to see what the data shows us and then come up with some recommendations on how to support that. So we're members of both of these project teams. Martin has been representing economic development as well. Next slide, please. With the work we did in the food processing sector, there is, well, it is an incredibly large sector. As you know, Brampton was recently named for the second year in a row the #1 in the food processing sector in North America. It is a substantial employer in the city. And it is one that we have certainly seen increase in its capacity as well as its importance throughout COVID. So we wanted to make sure that we were helping the businesses in this sector retain the staff that they have, and how can they recruit new staff. As you can see on this slide, there is a deficit of jobs that are going unfilled in the country. And because of the importance of the sector in Brampton, we wanted to be a part of the report from OCC. Next slide, please. So these are the names of the companies that the OCC and Food and Beverage Ontario interviewed. Martin was present at all of these interviews, and he certainly coordinated the interviews happening. Next slide, please. So these were carried out at the highest levels of each organization, and there have been several meetings about the report. It is in development. It is not public yet, but it will be later on this late winter, I would say, in March. And then we will have some recommendations coming out of that we will come to council with to share, so that we can see where economic development in the city can focus in terms of how can we assist. Next slide, please. With the logistics sector, This study also put a spotlight on some of the innovative practices that we need to carry out and take on in order to help people seek jobs in that sector, secure jobs in that sector, and how can we help newcomers become part of that workforce as well. Next slide, please. I don't think I need to spend much time on this report. I think that repeats some of the things I said as well under the food processing. This will also be completed later on this year. We will certainly come to council with the findings, and you'll see some familiar names on this slide of who participated in this study for us as well. Next slide, please. What we have heard from our partners is that they want to make sure that the studies come with recommendations, and that it isn't just repeating some of the information that we already anecdotally know. So it really is a priority for us to help with that workforce development, to take recommendations out of the study and for us to really act upon them. I have had conversations with the Brampton Board of Trade to help with that as well, so that we can work together with their members to work with Brampton businesses. Next slide, please.
That's the end of the slides, Claire.
Okay, so I'm sorry we didn't have Martin come and present, but I've shared with you the basic message that he would have shared with you, in that there are workforce shortages in the city. We are working with partners across the country and across the province to try and get the data that we can then know where we can focus. Brampton businesses are very receptive to our engagement. They're very happy to participate in this. Some of them are coming up with their own innovative ideas on how to access the new workforce and retain the new workforce, but it is certainly a message that we're hearing from economic development this year and a priority for our office. Thank you very much.
Chair Medeiros,
Yes, City Clerk, I'm just... Okay, so are there any questions or comments? I see none. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Bowman to receive the presentation. Anyone opposed? I see none. Motion carries. Our next report is the staff report regarding the potential scope for an educational employment master plan.
Mr. Chair, that item was withdrawn from the agenda.
My apologies. So then I believe public question period, or there are any councillor question period, any questions for members of committee? I see none. Public question period, are there any questions for members of the public?
There are none.
Thank you. Hand it over now to Chair Singh of Corporate Services section.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros. We don't have any staff presentations. For reports, we have 12.2.1, staff report titled Request to Begin Procurement, Recruitment Services for Executive and Specialized Roles for a 3-year period. This was held by Councillor Bowman, so we'll open it up with you.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions about this report, but I would like to refer it back to staff to come back at our council meeting on March 2nd. There's some information that I think is pretty important to know about this. You know, I don't know if we're allowed to say, I don't think it's a closed session, who the current suppliers of this service are, but I would like to know, you know, how many times we have used them since this contract started, and the dollar value that we've spent with each. And the other thing that I'm just questioning is, you know, we've talked about procurement before, and in a lot of situations we've asked why these things come to us when there's only a couple of weeks left on them. I noticed in the report that we would have to go back to the current suppliers and negotiate some time extension because we only have, I think, 3 weeks or 4 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm just wondering why this did not come back to us before Christmas, before budget, so that we could have included that in the budget presentations. But I would just like to refer it back and have some answers to those questions come back, so we can discuss this in terms of, you know, the benefit to the city, the cost to the city, and the number of positions that we've actually used these companies for. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. So I guess that's a referral motion to council.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I took Councillor Bowman as moving a referral back to staff for a report back to council on March 2nd with the additional information requested.
Is that, does that accurately capture what you're trying to achieve, Councillor Bowman?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Speaking to the referral back to staff, Councillor Medeiros.
Yeah, thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Fully supportive of the information that you're seeking to come back. I do agree. I'd be also interested to know in sort of the report back, because I do know that some of the commissioners, they use their own P cards when it comes to headhunters doing work for them. So I'd like to get an understanding then exactly in terms of the company that, you know, in terms of what we're using, who we're using. Are there companies currently that are barred from doing business with the city of Brampton? So I'm hoping that information would sort of come back as well. But thank you very much, Councillor Bowman. Happy to support it.
Thank you. We have a referral back to staff by Councillor Bowman. Is anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. Moving on, our next item is 12.2.1. Sorry, just got lost in yep, 12.2.2. Staff report regarding the 2022 Brampton Tourism Event Funding Program. This was also held by Councillor Bowman. Councillor Bowman, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Sorry to hold some of these items and extend council, but I just have some questions about some of these groups. In the Marquee Festival funding, the groups there, certainly some of them are recognizable and well-deserving of funding. There's no question about that. I'm just wondering, when we talked about the Marquee Festival and changing some of the criteria, when did we not talk about some of these festivals demonstrating to us longevity, you know, their ability to put on the festival and hold the festival yearly? Wasn't that one of the criteria to become a marquee festival in the city of Brampton? Because honestly, I don't recognize a couple of the names here that we're designating as marquee festivals.
Good morning, Chair. Through you, I will ask that Director Jason Tummins please respond to the question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and to Cynthia, I don't see Jason in the session at the moment, nor is he in the chamber at the moment.
Okay, thank you. May I please ask that we take that back for staff to be able to please respond to the question as posed by the councillor, please?
Sure, it's coming back. Oh, sorry.
Through the chair, Laura Lacasic here, and I'm happy to answer that question for you, Councillor Bowman.
Oh, sure, thanks.
You are correct. This year, though, under council's past approval, we did look at the economic impact of the events that we are approving. So all of the events that you see here have met the minimum qualifications to be a marquee festival, and also looking at their economic impact on the city as a result of the event taking place, as well as how those groups are going to recognize the city's support. So the funding model has changed a little bit for 2022 and will still going forward into 2023 and beyond. And in fact, the Battle 905 that you see there at the top scored very, very highly in terms of economic impact and recognition of the city as a sponsor.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Now, in the past, the marquee festivals the groups that got nominated for that and were actually given it. I believe it started, didn't it, with Carabram and Rotary at one point. I think those were the two originals. And then we've added some, which is fantastic. I love to see marquee events being added. Did those groups that we nominated for marquee, did they not come before council and sort of explain what their festival is and what they do and what the economic impact was? Was that part of our decision prior to this year?
Through the chair, that hasn't happened since I've been with this portfolio, so in the last 5 years or so. We're happy to share, the information that was provided to us through the evaluation. We did this year, for the first time for these groups, actually do an economic impact calculation, and are planning to work a little bit more with all of our groups just to enforce, it's not just a festival for residents, but we'd like to attract some visitors to our city as well. Not only to put us on the map and in terms of the great festivals that we have here in Brampton, but also to help the economic impact.
Oh, fully agree, Lauren. Now that will be a responsibility of your department, I would guess, making sure that we get outside or information about our festivals to people within whatever we're deciding, a 20, 30, 40 kilometer radius.
Through the chair, that is correct, Councillor Bowman. So it's actually a 40-kilometer radius. Once you've traveled that distance, to attend an event in Brampton, you are considered a tourist.
Okay, and that's good that we're getting the tourists in as well. I think it's also important that local Brampton residents and local Brampton businesses support these as much as possible as well, especially coming out of COVID. I think buy local is a theme that we're hearing, especially in our downtown. So I think that's just as important to get people from our own city out to these events as well. Did this money come down from two years ago or last year before COVID?
Through the chair, you are correct, Councillor Bowman. It has come down $5,000 from the last full round of granting that we did in 2019. But we've also had a couple of additions to this group. Our long-term plan is to implement the Municipal Accommodation Tax, which would give us some additional dollars to sponsor these events and more going forward, but it has come down slightly.
Okay, the only reason I'm asking, Laura, is, with COVID, and with the past 2 years, some of these festivals not being able to take place or being able to take place only online, I would think that we would probably increase it a little bit this year to allow them that flexibility that they haven't had in the past couple of years to get their festivals going, to make sure that attraction hasn't dropped from 2 or 3 years ago, and that we can sort of reinvent some of these. Is $55,000 enough to do that when it was $60,000 prior to COVID?
Through the chair, I believe it's doable for the majority of these groups. We ask that the city not be the only funder of an event, so the onus is also on the organizers to find other sponsors and sources of funding through grants, etc.
Okay, and I agree with that. I agree with that totally. And there are some events I know that get a lot of sponsorship out of this list that's here. There is also a list of sports tourism events. Do we have that list?
Through the chair, Councillor Bowman, that was not included as part of this report, Jason Tamming, the Director of Strategic Communications, has delegated authority to approve those, but I can certainly send them to you.
Okay, no, the only reason I'm asking, Laura, is because in the past there have been events where some of us have declared, when we approve these expenditures, there's been some events that some of us have declared conflicts on for one reason or another, and when we're spending almost $500,000, 460,250 of a drawdown from reserve funds. And myself, I'm just going to speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but you know, there may be something for lacrosse in there, which I might have to declare a conflict on. Can we get that list prior to approving this so that none of us puts ourselves in a position of conflict?
Through the chair, I can absolutely send that. In fact, I can send that right now, Mr. Clerk, just to keep this process moving.
Okay, yeah, it's just, again, it may cause a little bit of a problem since we didn't get that list that we're here talking about that, if any of us had to declare a conflict on that. Now, just one last question. The drawdown of $460,000 from Reserve 16, did we know about that for the budget?
Through the chair, I don't believe so.
Okay, so this is going to have to be sort of a budget amendment as well, taking the money from our reserve funds, because we didn't plan that in the approved budget. I guess that might be a question to finance, but that's okay. I mean, I'm all in favor of getting events going, and I'm all in favor of sports tourism, so that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, if this was something that should have been in our budget, that it should have been there, we should have seen it, but that's all right. So I know there's other people with other questions, and I will turn the floor over to them, and thanks very much for this, Laura.
Through the chair, you're welcome, Councillor Bowman, and I have sent the full list of recommended recipients to the city clerk.
Thank you. Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's Peter. May I just provide some clarification before we move on? So I think Laura has said she's provided the list of, I believe it's the 13 sports tourism groups that have received funding. So my understanding is that the decision-making on that doesn't rest with council. It's been delegated to the Director of Strategic Development, Culture and Events to make those decisions, but the list itself presumably can be made public. So in that effect, as there is a decision-making that's occurring not before council, I don't know if there would be a conflict at that point. It's just information that would be shared. But we'll make that list public with the agenda.
Are we okay, Councillor Bowman?
Yeah, thanks very much for the clarification.
Okay. Next speaker, I believe it starts with Mayor Brown, unless Councillor Medeiros, were you to speak to this or the previous item?
It was the previous one. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. So we've got some amazing signature events in the city of Brampton, and similar to Councillor Bowman's inquiry, I'm concerned what it means for those that have gone down in funding. We're seeing increased pressures with COVID. There are inflationary pressures, and if you're putting on a big event that requires their sort of standing costs, those costs aren't going down. And so, I look at signature events like the Jazz Festival or the Rotary Rib Festival that have real benefit to our community, drive attention and interest, and in the case of the Rib Fest, the ribbon roll, it ends up with huge support for a local charitable cause. And I want to get a better understanding in terms of what marquee events would actually lose funding under this new formula. So I'm not sure, Laura or Jason, if you could tell me who would see their funding go down. Which events are those?
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor, all of the applicants requested the maximum, which is $60,000, except for Sikh Heritage Month.
So, and I guess I'm not. I guess, so Laura, I guess my question is not what people asked for. What I'm interested in is in terms of the previous years. So, over the last few years, for these annual well-known Brampton events, which ones that previously got funding are going to see that funding decline. I guess it's declined by 5,000. Is it, or is it 10,000 over a few years? Can you just say that list for us right now in terms of which ones would be going down and how many?
Yes. So in 2019, so pre-COVID, there were groups who did receive $65,000, all the way to $53,750. So some are seeing a $10,000 decline over the past 3 years. Some are seeing a little bit of a small bit of an increase since 2019.
Okay, so which are the groups that are seeing the decrease?
So those would be our large ones: Caribram, Arts and Culture Initiative of South Africa, or South Asia. Sorry, my apologies. Jazz, The Fold. Those are the large ones that are seeing the $10,000 decrease since 2019.
Okay, these are the ones that are down since 2019.
Correct, of $10,000.
Okay, so the list I see on the screen, those are recommended, but what I don't see is the ones that are going down, because how many would it be that are going down?
Let me just do a quick count here.
Mayor Brown, while Laura's looking at the check, so I just want to provide a bit of clarity on the recommended amount differs from past years, and so the recommended funding, the thought was, because it's a COVID year, while the calculator will be used, the economic impact calculator, to be used in future years, because predominant number of them would lose anything at all, including some by a significant margin. The thought was give additional training and work with those groups to improve applications throughout this year into next, and then by providing this level of funding rather than just kind of letting it roll out, and a number of them would lose funding. So the idea was to keep the funding up this year and provide the additional training. Those numbers vary drastically up and down the table, but Laura may have it on hand, or we can definitely provide it to council after the fact.
So yeah, and I just want to speak to the marquee events that would see a decline, and so obviously Caribram, Rip and Roll.
Chair, Mayor Brown, there are 7 that would see a decline. 7 of 10.
7 of 10 that are going from 65 to 53.
Through the chair, to 55.
Yes. Okay.
So
I am worried. Some of these events I'm not that familiar with, but the ones that I am familiar with in terms of Caribram, Ribbon Roll, The Fold, Jazz Festival, these are great events that drive interest in our community. And, I worry, in a year that's already difficult because of inflationary pressures, we're going to make their event more difficult. And so, maybe I'm going to hear what other speakers say, but, maybe the clerk can help me. But, I'd like to see a motion where we don't see a marquee event lose funding this year. So there's a level of predictability that they can work within, because it is going to be challenging to put events on. And even if you look at staff costs, there's been inflation in the cost to hire people to run events. You talk to any restaurant in terms of the cost of hiring staff. And so if you're going to, some of these events are run on volunteers. Some of them you have to hire security and additional staff to put these events on. I just don't want to make it harder. We got to get back on our feet as a community. We're going to emerge from COVID, and I hope some of these signature Brampton events can be exceptional this year. I don't want to do anything to hold them back. So maybe we could get some wordsmithing for a motion that can be put forward that could that could rectify this. And one event I don't see on the list, and you know, it's an important event, is the Portuguese Festival too. And so, you know, I'll take some guidance from Councillor Medeiros on and Vicente to see what's required there in terms of having that event back as well. So I will reserve my comments for now, but I'll see if the clerk can work on some language before we conclude this item that would be able to make sure that none of these marquee events would lose funding if they previously received it. And apologies for Savannah in the background. I think she sounds sad about the marquee events losing funding too.
Thank you. Councillor Willens?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. I think both Councillor Bowman and the Mayor and myself are on along the same lines here. I'm just curious. I'm not blaming anybody. I know that COVID has really put a strain on everybody, but I'm just curious why this wasn't negotiated at budget. It's really a small ask. Even if they had kept the same, especially for the ones that I know about that, you know, that received the 60,000 in 2021, and that was a real difficult year. They were able to operate. So I'm just wondering, maybe I guess I'll wait for the Mayor to wordsmith something. But I mean, it would be simple. This is just a recommended amount, but why couldn't we just put it back to what they were in 2021 and say, you know, the marquees that were basically just adding 5,000 to bop it back up? That's only 10 over the 10 groups. It's only a $50,000 ask, and that's a pretty small ask at budget time. So I'm just wondering if we can consider that. But if the Mayor has something that can provide additional funding or more money for these marquee events, I think it's very important, because these are very special. And I'm glad that the Mayor brought up the Portuguese event, because I know that they did have a challenging time, and I believe, and Councilor Medeiros or Vicente can clarify that, but I think they canceled their event altogether because of COVID, and that may be why they're not even on here. But anyway, no, I'm all for keeping these marquees and supporting these marquee events, because it is very important. And as you said, I think it was Laura that said that that they do draw from other people, other residents from other municipalities. So it's important that we keep these and support these as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Willens. Councillor Policy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I'm not going to reiterate what has been said. I agree with the previous speakers 100%. I guess my concerns are more around the sports tourism events and also the neighborhood initiatives. Anytime that a report comes before us that we're giving money out, I think, regardless of where the delegated authority is, and I'm not looking to change that, but that needs to be in the report. Anytime the City of Brampton gives money out like this, I think it should be fully transparent in a list of all of those organizations or groups that are being funded or awarded funding. Needs to be here, regardless if it's a council decision to allow them to get the funding or not. I think it needs to be in the report. So hopefully the Mayor takes that back into the motion that he's crafting, and I'm guessing that this is going to start looking like a referral to council before it comes back. And then some of the same concerns that Councillor Bowman had around the Marquee Festival, and I and Councillor Bowman were very vocal when we first developed this program around what the marquee events would look like, and what kind of testing they needed to get through to become marquee events. And I'm not familiar with some of these that are on here, so I would like a better understanding, or maybe we can provide additional information around what that test to become the marquee festival is, and what it looks like, if that could also come back in the report as well, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Medeiros?
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair. I think a lot has been already said, which I wanted to share. Yeah, I do scratch my head why we didn't sort of deal with this at budget, but I do understand maybe there was direction not to deal with it. That said, exactly as Councillor Policy just stated and others, there are 4 or 5 events here which I consider marquee, and since I've been a councillor, we know the impact it's had, like Fold, Slam Dunk, certainly Ribbon Roll, World Jazz Festival, and I'm sure other ones which are starting to become a Caribram, obviously. There are other ones, I don't have that information. I imagine through you, Chair, to staff, and again, I guess for the public's understanding, the marquee events would have had some form of, I guess, history, and I know in the report it speaks to it, but in terms of meeting their objectives, what we have here is a list, of my understanding, are those who are putting forth, a solid proposal based on criteria you establish, but also if they've had previous history, they've actually met objectives. Can you just confirm that to staff?
Through the chair, Laura Lacasek here again. We did come to council previously based on the Brampton tourism strategy and the recommendation that the grant program incrementally move more toward a sponsorship program. And so the intent this year that was the evaluation was going to be strictly quantitative based on economic impact and a score of what the organizers would do to recognize the city support. We see that we need to do more work with our groups to actually fully implement that plan, but certainly all of the groups that you see here have met the minimum qualifications to be considered a marquee event, which includes budget being based in Brampton, all of those sorts of criteria pieces.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, I know there was one event, and I'm not going to name specifics, where I think they just had a postal code in Brampton, but they were actually based out of the city. And again, I'm not going to get into that. I just think that in terms of notwithstanding some of these festivals, yeah, I am concerned if, I guess I don't want to belabor the point because I do see Mayor Brown on there. Just regarding, I guess I do know that the Portuguese event, I know there's been some issues that we have to sort of work our way through. But any motion coming forward, I would want to put an amendment because I do know that there was challenges before, and especially now with COVID. But I do think that we would hate to lose one of the strong multicultural festivals here in Brampton, and I'll look forward to I guess Mayor Brown next on speaking. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. I think you're going to be suggesting a motion. So
I'm going to have the clerk assist me with this, but what I'd like to suggest is that the events that were awarded the marquee funding previously be maintained at that level, and the Portuguese community event, and Councilor Medeiros and Vicente can correct me with the official spelling of that cultural celebration, which was quite significant, be invited to be part of the marquee events for this calendar year. And I just add one final point. Given the fact we've been through COVID and a lot of these events were canceled, if anything, I would assume that the city may have savings from not having the same level of commitment to these events. I know there were some attempts for some of these events to be virtual, but you'd have to assume the city's actually had savings in the last 2 years because of the lack of events. And if anything, it should put us in a better position to support these events this year when we're going to be actually allowed to host them. So to the clerk, I know I'm giving you the motion for the first time rather than writing it out, but it would be that the marquee events previously awarded funding levels not be decreased for this year, and that the Portuguese community event be invited to be listed as one of the marquee events as well.
And Mayor Brown, through the chair, it's Jason. So I just want to provide some clarity to council that there are two, and Laura, maybe if you could outline which two they are. So the reason it's from 60 to 55 this year recommended is because two new ones were added. The language you just provided would be to ones that received the 60 grand in the past, which means those two would not necessarily be included there. Is that
not new ones.
And which two are those, Laura?
Through the chair, let me just pull up my list. It is Battle 905 is one of them, and Return the Love is the second.
And the reason I say only pre-existing ones is a new one doesn't have any expectation of a previous level of support, but for the pre-existing events who go to the same contractors, who go to, who know what their operational costs are, there was a level of expectation of what they could work with in terms of city support. If it's some new event, then, that expectation is different.
And then the other thing I just mentioned, so if we want to update the Portuguese group, Peter, it would be Lusophonia. My understanding is the current status is with a balance owing and a grant report outstanding. So I think, I don't know how you'd want to address those elements that have been communicated to the group as necessary for future funding, but there's some elements there that have been communicated to them, and just if we want to outline the proper name would be Lusophonia.
Over to Councilor Medeiros and Vicente, that is the correct name, right?
Yeah.
Councilor Medeiros, go ahead.
Oh, thank you through your chair. My apologies. Thank you, Mayor Brown, and thank you, Jason. Yes, it is the Lusophonia Festival, and I would just put an asterisk subject to, because you are right, there are elements that we have to deal with. So subject to mutual agreement or subject to approval by council. So if we can deal with because there was, my understanding, outstanding debt. There's specifics to it, and there's an opportunity, my understanding from the organizer who owns as part of a media group, is looking for ways to be able to, I guess during COVID, but is willing for ways to provide communication supports or like media buys and so on to make up what might be the difference. And I'll leave that to staff to negotiate and bring something back to council as something that we can review. So I would say something subject to council approval or recommendations by the director of communication. Whatever you feel comfortable with, Jason, that you can bring something forward to council for our consideration.
And I'd almost say, Councilor Medeiros, ideally, if we could fix this for council next week, because these organizations need to start putting in the legwork to pull off events of this size. And I believe on the Portuguese event, and I've had a number of community members from the cultural center contact me. Part of the issue was that the money that was owed was based on rentals of city facilities, and I guess stages, and the costing came back at something that was not consistent with the private sector rental fees, and so it threw off their budget. But I'm sure that's something that could be reconciled if we get this is part of the final ratification next week if those connections can be made.
And then through the chair, the one other thing I just mentioned on point 7 there, Peter, so the final figure, I think I'm not sure I can do that math on the fly, unfortunately, but I don't know if we want to reference that and then make number 7 totals subject to the math outlined in number 5, just so that we can figure out those details, because if it's $5,000 for 8 of them, that's 40, and then there's the additional 60 for the Lusophonia potentially based on coming back, so that's around 100. But I'm just mindful that number 7 might need an edit.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, thank you, Jason. So recommendation 7 should be amended appropriately to say, I think is Charlotte is typing out with the additional amount required to restore the previous levels and add the additional Lusophonia funding that would be subject to the council approval of that. Yeah, so whatever that amount is.
Thank you. I don't see, wait, just wait a couple seconds. Okay, I don't see any other questions on the board. We have the recommendations from staff as amended on the screen. We'll have it moved by Councillor Medeiros. Is anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. Moving on to Councillor question period. Do any members of council have any questions? Hearing and seeing none, we have public question period. To the clerk, are there any questions from the public?
There are none.
Okay, our next item is referred matters list. The list is published quarterly on a meeting agenda, and a copy is linked with each agenda to include a current listing of matters referred to city staff or further review and or a report back to council or committee. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the referred matters list? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much through you, Mr. Chair. I looked at the referred matters list and I have a concern about it because there's about, I don't know, 70 items on here. And the majority of all the items on here, the revised target date is 22/03/02. So that would put it, approximately a month away. And I'm not certain that we're going to get answers back on all of these by the end of Q1. So I'm just wondering if these revised target dates are going to be further revised for the next council meeting in the referred matters list so we know exactly when we can expect these. I think it's asking a little too much of the CAO and staff to get back on all of these.
Through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps I could start and just, yes, staff do monitor the list, and if the timeline has come and gone, we go back to staff from the clerk's office to get a revised timeline and a more appropriate timeline for any report back.
Okay, and specifically I have a question about one of them, and that's the CW 304 2021. That's a motion that I put forward in June of this past year. And that is the I guess, list or report on the external legal services used by each of our departments. Who the legal service was externally and the amount we spent on each. I thought that was going to come back prior to budget so that we would know if external legal is something we should start bringing, some of it in-house if it was all in certain areas, like, for instance, planning or something like that. We didn't see it then. When, maybe if Samir can tell me when we are going to see this report.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's Peter. Sorry, I don't know if Samir is on.
I am Peter.
Oh, okay. Samir, would you like me to start, or do you wish to answer?
Sure. Through the chair, that report, as I mentioned during budget as well, has gone through review by most departments. There's a couple of departments that are remaining to review it and kind of put the finishing touches on that. And due to delays, we haven't been able to. We didn't want to present a piecemeal report. We wanted to present a consolidated report. I'm hoping to have it by early March, and I think that's doable.
Okay, thank you, Samir.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, we'll move on to public question period. To the clerk, is there any questions from the public?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is, I'll categorize it as a question. It's from Sylvia Roberts regarding the Portuguese Festival is spelled Lusophonia as opposed to the way that we spelt it in the clerk's record on the screen, so we will correct that
Thank
to
you, and
spell
thank
it
you,
correctly.
Sylvia. Yep, thank you, and thank you, Sylvia, for recognizing that and letting us know. Our next item is closed, so I will also ask, we'll take a break as well. So we could come back, so I'm up to council, either 30 minutes or 45-minute lunch. Any recommendations from councilors?
I think that we've only got two things in close now. Is that true?
No, I think there's three. In my notes, I have 15.2, 15.3, and 15.4. Is that correct to the clerk?
That is correct. 15.2 to 15.4, 3 items.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure. Whatever council suggests is fine. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, let's do 12:15 then, 30-minute break, and we'll return back and head into closed at that point. I have a motion moved by Councillor Bowman to move into closed and return back at 12:15. Is anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries.
Just before we get started, members of committee I do see present in the session is Councillor Santos, Councillor Vasante, Councillor Policy, Councillor Medeiros, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Willens, Councillor Dillon has joined. Chair Singh has joined. So, Mr. Chair, it is 1:30. I do see a quorum present. I have Councillor Santos, Councillor Vasante, Councillor Policy, Councillor Medeiros, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Willens, Councillor Dillon, and yourself present.
Thank you, and in the continuing interest of transparency and open government, I will report in public session any outcomes from today's closed session business. As a result of our closed session today, I will have actually the clerk report out to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to members of committee, under 15.1, this item was approved as part of the consent motion and not discussed in closed session. 15.2, this item was considered by committee in closed session. Information was received and procedural direction was given to refer the matter to the March 2nd council meeting, closed session. Item 15.3, the item was considered by committee in closed session. Information was received and no direction was given to staff. And finally, item 15.4, this item was considered by committee in closed session. Information was received and no direction was given to staff. And just for the public record, as requested by committee, this discussion in closed session related to a resolution of council that carried at the February 8th special council meeting in regards to a request to the city solicitor to provide information at the February 16th meeting in regards to a few matters. Those matters, advice was provided, information was received and considered by the committee, and no direction was provided. Mr. Chair, that is the report out.
Thank you, and I have a motion by Councillor Fortini for adjournment. Is anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Oh,
yeah.
sorry, I didn't see Councillor Fortini there, but he is in the session. My apologies.
Okay, perfect. And I just want to end off.
I'm here.
Yeah, please stay safe, stay healthy, get your vaccination or booster shot, practice physical distancing, and wear a mask. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This meeting is now recessed. We're just going to